Hi, I'm Matt, and I'm here to do a video on wildlife photography. Some of the basic accessories that I use, as well as the camera, lenses, and just kind of giving more information. This is kind of an overview video, kind of in a wide range of different things I'm going to cover in here in a basic way. So I'm going to try to put links to things in this video to other videos that give you more information on specific accessories, for example, that I use and show in this video. So I just want to kind of get into it. You want to pick the camera body and lens that is going to work best for the wildlife photography that you're going to be doing. If you're going to be doing birds or mammals, you're going to have possibly different lenses. That's going to depend, how close you can get to the subject and the size of the subject. I'm just going to kind of give you an overview of what I use and show you some of the things. Well, I'm going to dive in here and bring up a very important thing, is a backpack or case to carry your gear in. This can be very important because, if you're hiking 5 miles or something to get out to what you're going to photograph, or if your species or whatever you're photographing is not in one location and you need to move around a lot, and even transporting it if you go on a plane or if in your car. This is a real good, you just need to invest in a good backpack or case. Personally, I like the backpacks because they're lighter than possibly a hard case like Pelican. I have a Pelican case as well. I just never use it because of its weight and its size. Love the backpack. You can configure it different ways that you want. I'm going to open it up. This one is a Think Tank HD. I think it's Streetwalker hard drive HD. I don't know. But anyways, I'm very happy with this bag. Now, okay, we'll give you an overview. I'm using a D800 for my wildlife photography. I really like it for detail and the croppability factor as far as the 36 megapixels go. That is what I'm using to record this video, so I won't be showing that. My main go-to lens, obviously, this is the 500mm f4 by Nikon VR version. Another lens that I like to use is the 70-200 VR2. And in here I just have a few other things. A 1.7 TC1.7 II. I'm getting into some of the other things you might use. Let me just talk about the lenses real quick. Now, like I said, you don't have to have a 500, 600 or something like that to go shoot wildlife photography. You really don't. It does come in handy with its quality and large f-stop for gathering a large amount of light and being able to give you the higher shutter speed. That's where these big primes come in to play. And I mean, of course, you can go out with a 150 to 500 Sigma, or Tamron's coming out with a 150 to 600, which may be a very good lens for somebody trying to stay in a budget. And those are excellent lenses. You put them on a full frame camera or even a newer crop body camera, and you can get really good results. It's kind of, your budget's really going to limit you as far as that goes, as far as if you're going to buy this or a Tamron or a Sigma, or if you're Canon, a 100 to 400. When it gets to wildlife photography, there's really no middle ground. That's kind of the problem that we run into, is because we either spend 10, or even 8 or 10 for something like this, or 1, 2, 3. It's kind of a big jump in between lens prices, and it kind of has the case of, if you're not going to use it every day or very often, is it worth it? It's kind of the price of the thing of diminishing returns. Is it's not 8 times better to have this versus one that costs an eighth of the price. For example, this isn't going to be 8 times better. It might be a little bit better. It's going to have better focusing. It's going to have the larger f-stop, so you can use more shallow depth of field, and you can have a higher shutter speed and lower your ISO, and may have better vibration resistance than the third-party lenses. But if you're going to be using a lot and you really want the best quality possible, then that's where these come into play. But you also have a prime lens now that has only one focal length, and also it's heavy and big. So this one has the, I really like this lens coat hard. They call it a hoodie. It works great. It's much smaller than the Nikon's version of this. I also have the lens coat in black on this, and this is the hood, obviously. And just to give you, if you haven't seen one of these or aren't familiar with them, they're rather large, and this one, the VR, the newest version, the 500 F4, is 8 pounds. I hand hold it pretty much all the time. I do use a monopod, but I'm going to go back into that a little bit later. Now, the 70-200, it's great to have one because, for one, if you're using a fixed focal length like a 500, you're not going to be able to, if you get very close, this has a minimum focusing distance of about, I'm guessing, without looking, about 14 feet. So, you know, if you are able to get close to the species, this may fill the frame too much. You might not even be able to get the whole body in frame with a lens like this. So it's always great to have maybe a secondary body with the 70-200 on, and then you're basically going to be able to get those wider shots if you have something fly by real close to you, like a bird, and you can't get it with this. Maybe a 70-200 may work for you. So that's great to have, as well as the any kind of a teleconverter. If you shoot Nikon, you have the option of the 1.4, 1.7, and the 2.0. Canon is the 1.4 and the 2.0. And then third-party manufacturers also have different offerings. I personally like the 1.7. I've used all of them. Obviously, the 1.4, either manufacturer, latest version, it's very good. It's much better. I mean, it's better than this, yes, but you're not gaining the extra millimeters that you will be with this. The big thing with teleconverters is not always the sharpness, is not always image quality, as far as you need to be able to autofocus and make sure your camera is autofocusing perfectly with it. I think most people get mad at teleconverters, and I've been in this personal situation as well. You put one on and you put it on a big lens, a big prime like this, or even a zoom like this, and you're getting inconsistent results. You're getting soft photos, and maybe the autofocus still works pretty well for you, but the biggest problem is not getting sharp photos. And a lot of times, I think it's the actual autofocus fine-tune, because you're changing a lot putting a teleconverter on. I've had to, once I fine-tune my body with this lens and this lens and this teleconverter, even at 100%, I was still getting really good feather detail, and there was not much difference between having it without the lens and not. The thing is, using it, you know, you got to understand you're adding focal length. You need a higher shutter speed. You're more susceptible to vibrations and camera movement, as well as then you're losing the extra light, so it makes it harder to focus, and it makes it need a slower shutter speed to use that same ISO. So it's really hard to compare the two. But once you do compare the two and you've done the autofocus fine-tune, then there's really not that much difference in this. I mean, obviously the image quality is going to be a little bit lower, but is it helping enough to make it worth it, you know? And in certain situations, I think it does. Personally, I like it to use it with smaller birds, where the minimum focusing distance of a lens like this may be 14 feet. Now, keeping the minimum focusing distance the same and making it an 850 millimeter lens can really do a lot as far as those small birds that you're able to get within minimum focusing distance, and then possibly with this fill the frame. So that is one positive, you know. But a lot of times it's not the thing to use. Sometimes for in-flight photography, it's just not the best, not fast enough autofocus with this, losing that extra stop and a half of light in this one in the case. Okay, well, let's get off of teleconverters a little bit and get into a few more things. So went over the lenses a little and the carrying things. Okay, another great thing to use in the field is sometimes you need to use flash, whether it be just a really bright day or an overcast day. anything where lighting is not great or is not optimal. Obviously, you know, in a bright day you might have real harsh shadows on one side and real harsh light on the other, and you know, you just have a dynamic range that is more than your camera can take. Or you may be in a really bad area like a swamp or something, and you might be photographing an owl and it's just in and out, and it may be in almost real dark areas, and then it might be in the bright sun, you know. So you need to have something to add a little light, sometimes some fill flash. And personally here I got the SB 600. I like it because of its size. It's a little bit smaller than the 700, and really it has the FP, so it's got the high the sync rate. So that's one other thing I'd like to say about the newer flashes. I really use this a lot of times just full manual, basically. I kind of, you know, get the exposure right, and if I'm using it for wildlife photography, you know, I might have it down in 1/16 or 1/32 of a power, just so I can add that tiny bit of light so it doesn't really, you know, doesn't really blow out the subject and really show up that you are using flash and make the background totally dark. Or you don't really want to do that unless that's the look you're going for. So you kind of want to add it so it just adds the shadow, basically. So you're basically making sure your highlights aren't blown out. Those are correct, but then you have your shadows that are darker, and you want to use a flash to kind of take those shadows up a little bit and make a more flat image, or you know, an image that actually has detail in the shadows. And another good thing with flash and doing anything wildlife is well, birds for instance, or the colors in their feathers. Now a lot of times when, you know, the light's going to hit it from the sun or something, it'll get those colors, but also you can do that with flash. The big thing you need to watch out with flash is the eyes of a bird. A lot of times something like an owl, you got to be really careful with a flash because they will get red eye so easily, and it's, you know, something you'd have to take out and post, so you just need to be really careful with it. So like I was saying, a newer flash like the 600 is FP compatible. It will sync at the higher frequency, so it will flash up to an 8,000th of a second, or basically the same as your camera body, the highest shutter speed it'll go. Now if you have an older flash or something like that, you may be stuck at only 1/250th of a second, which can be very hindrance to wildlife photography, where you want to have a higher shutter speed than that at certain instances for birds in flight or birds moving or small birds that are really twitchy. So that's one good thing about this. I can use 1,000th or 1,500th of a second if I want, and still use flash and get good results. So like I was saying, the SB600, it's one of the lowest, smallest flashes that still does that. Now the better beamer, if you guys aren't familiar with it, and I might go into more detail on some of these things in another video, but it is basically just a Fresnel lens, and it attaches to the front of your flash like so, with these plastic brackets and velcros to fit, and it allows your flash to run at a lower power and reach farther, basically. You know, just as a little example, you know, you might use one full power of a flash, you know, okay, and this may allow you to do quarter power or an eighth of a power to get the same results at a distance, basically. They recommend this for a lens of 300 or greater, so it works well with a 500. Anything less than a 300, basically the field of view of the better beamer is not going to cover the whole frame. So basically that's the reason why they do that. Personally, I'll use this if the subject is a good deal away, you know, 30, 50, 100 feet away. I can use this in a low flash power setting, and it worked pretty good. You know, you are susceptible to some spots of brightness. You know, you just need to mess with it a lot and figure out what works best for you. So this, like I was saying, and it's good to, with a large lens like a 500, is to keep it off the camera body and actually put it on the bracket like I have set up here. For example, this is 500 millimeter, has the Really Right Stuff foot, if you can see. down on the bottom here, really right stuff. And I like it because it's still the handle, it still has great room to put your hand, but this has a little area in the top that will have an area for a reverse Arca style, I guess you would call this, because this has the Arca style plate on it as well, so I can put it into a monopod or tripod head or whatever that has the Arca style. But at the end it has this area where I can put a flash bracket of sorts, and as you can see, this will work like this and keep a flash cable some sort, and you can just and then you're ready to go, and this connects to the camera body obviously. So that's kind of the setup. The reason why is if you had the flash obviously on the camera, it would almost be blocked by the lens hood, and also having your flash above or off the camera helps a lot with the look of the flash, and having the light of the eye of the subject be better, show up better, and not be red as often. So it helps a lot with that. But obviously the biggest thing is getting it off out of the way of this and up a little bit higher. So that's kind of how that works. And obviously that's another thing, I keep all of these in the bag when I do wildlife photography. Now, a few other things that I might go into. It's always nice if you want to do some landscapes, you know, have a remote trigger of some sort that works with your camera. So if you're doing the longer exposures, you'll be able to get your hand off, and so you don't have to use the remote timer on the camera. You can just use that remote shutter to keep from vibration. Also nice to have with you, this is a 6-stop ND filter by B&W. It's nice for if you're going to do your landscapes or something and you want to cut down on some of that light for a longer exposure. Now I also like to have this is a Tiffin variable, it's the circle polarizer, so that's another good thing to have with when it's really bright and sunny and you got the reflections off the water sometimes. Use that. I have it at 77mm, so I can have it on that. I don't have the drop-in filter for the 500. I used to, but I just wasn't too happy with it and didn't use it much, so I don't have that anymore. Now another thing that I carry a lot here in the side pocket, I have a Black Rapid strap. Now this is nice. Like I said, I handhold this a lot, and sometimes I won't even use the Black Rapid strap, but if I do plan to handhold a lot and I don't want to bring the monopod with me, I can put this lens or this lens on a Black Rapid strap, and that works really well. It's just basically like a shoulder strap. And what else do we have in here? Pretty much all of it. Now obviously I have a few other pockets and things. Okay, keep some kind of a lens cloth. I have a few cloths I can wipe off things with. One of the best things to have, extra battery. You never know when you'll need that. If you're using a lot of live view or VR, that can run your battery really low. What I usually have in here is a tripod foot, basically a foot that goes onto Arca style, and then you can screw it into the base of your camera if you're going to do something that you need a tripod with. Else I keep adapter rings, because a lot of times I'll want to be able to use those ND filters or the circle polarizer on different lenses, so different adapter rings for that. Those are the biggest things that I use, and it's good to have. This actually came with the bag, which is nice. It's a waterproof or water resistant cover for your whole backpack. If you were to get trapped out in the rain, then hopefully that hasn't happened to me yet, and I'm glad, but hopefully that will help. So kind of some of the things that I use.